And as you see, okay. And as you see, our theme this year is Radical Dreams, a journey towards a better tomorrow. So again, thank you all for being here today. And now we're going to have our executive board introduce themselves.
Hey everybody, thank y'all for being here today. I am Peyton Anderson. I am one of the co-presidents for BFSA this year.
And I didn't introduce myself either. I'm Darius Jones. I serve as one of the co-presidents for BFSA as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Desiree Cross Ward, and I am BFSA's co-president-elect.
Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Carter, and I'm also BFSA's co-president-elect.
Hello, everybody. I'm Thomas Gutierrez. I am the, oh my gosh, I just forgot everything. BFSA's digital historian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Quantaria Roberson. I'm BFSA's Membership and Community Engagement Chair.
Hey, y'all. So good to see you. I'm Charles G. I am BFSA's treasurer.
Good morning. My name is Naisha Brown, and I am the treasurer-elect.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Shalia Fox, and I am BFSA's secretary.
All right. So now we want to have a welcome from DDCE. So we want to invite Dr. LaToya Smith to go ahead and bring the welcome from DDCE.
Thank you for having me. First, let me apologize. These allergies have me sounding like a 1920s jazz singer, so I'm a little raspy right now, but I will get through this. But I did want to say I am honored to be here with y'all today. The annual luncheon is a wonderful celebration of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and a favorite tradition of mine on campus. It's unfortunate that, as we said, we can't be gathered in the same room as we have in the past, but we're gathered together, and that's what's important. I couldn't think of a better time than now for us to reflect on the life and the service and the legacy of Dr. King. You know, he said, change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. And I think about that word a lot, struggle. Especially today, given the events that have weighed heavily on our hearts and our minds. But the other word that I focus on a lot that he held on to was hope. You know, he held on to hope that more people would rise and fight for what they believe in. And, you know, over my 15 years being on this campus, I have seen the amazing work that has happened with students, with faculty, staff, alumni, who've worked to make campus so welcoming and inclusive, especially for Black and Latinx students. You know, one of the reasons I love being on this campus is the power of the student voice. And just like in years past, this summer, our students once again pushed us to wake up and make change. And that led to institutional commitments from the president, from collegiate athletics, and so many others on our campus. But, you know, our work is not finished. We still have to create an environment where students, staff, and faculty not just survive on this large, you know, and sometimes overwhelming campus, but also thrive. I want to take a minute to personally thank BFSA members for contributing to that work. Tirelessly, oftentimes thanklessly work. BFSA embodies that spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King, and I'm so thankful for the work that you do, that we continue to do to make this campus special. And when I look back on how far this campus has come from, you know, the Black undergraduates that were admitted in 1956 to, you know, the recent changes in statues, buildings, campus landmarks, and even changes in the makeup of faculty and student government, I look forward to what, you know, this future holds for this great university. And as I said before, the work is not finished, but it does show me that we can do the work when we're committed to it. We have a lot of ground to cover, especially in the area of recruitment and retention of Black and Latinx students. But I'm heartened to see even that the percentage of Black students here at UT has increased to over 5%. And that, while the number is still low, it was the direct collaborative efforts of a lot of different people committed to that goal and committed to moving this needle forward in the right direction. You know, as my role as a vice president of DDCE, I continue to look forward partnering with BFSA and building on that progress and moving us forward and creating even more access to the next generation of dreamers and innovators, change makers, and thought leaders who are going to fulfill the mission of this university. I want to thank you all for having me and allowing me to officially welcome on behalf of DDCE and celebrating with you, the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. I look forward to meeting with you all in person next year. And I also want to apologize for that squeaky air conditioner sound in the back. It's the love of being in the tower. So please forgive the sound in the back, but I was trying to power through despite all that. So thank you again. And I look forward to today's celebration.
And I totally should have mentioned this before Dr. Smith began speaking, but she is our new VP for the Division of Diversity and Community Engagement. And we're so happy to have her with DDCE and in this role and continuing to support the work of BFSA. So if we can give her a virtual round of applause quickly to celebrate her coming into that role.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Smith. Welcome. We look forward to working with you and seeing what great things come out of DDCE under your leadership. It is my pleasure to thank the campus partners on UT's campus and the Longhorn community for giving BFSA the love and the support, the continued support throughout the years, especially the Office of the President, the Office of the Vice President in Student Affairs, DDCE, Enrollment Management and Student Success, and Human Resources. We're also incredibly thankful that leaders have taken the time out of their very busy schedules to join us here today. I know that Dr. Lilly is here. Thank you to Dr. Smith. I see that Dean Goldbart is here from CNS. And of course, we're so grateful that Colonel Holland could join us. He is such an important pillar in our community at large and our Longhorn community. And it is always a pleasure to see you, Colonel Holland. And we thank you for your presence. If you would like, if you're here and you're a leader and you would like to continue to support or learn more about supporting BFSA, you're more than welcome to chat me directly or get in touch with Peyton and Darius or Charles, any of us really. And we'd be happy to share the opportunities to support BFSA with you.
Thanks, Shalia. So before we dive into our program, we're going to start off by having Raina Ware, who's a UT senior public health major, sing the Black National Anthem, better known as Lift Every Voice and Sing. And I believe there is a link to the lyrics if you want to follow along, but Raina will be singing for us.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has brought us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
We really appreciate Raina for doing that. She wasn't able to be here today, but so graciously offered to record the video to be a part of this celebration. So we have a lot of talent here at UT, and so we're always happy to celebrate that and share that talent of our students with the community. And so we're getting to the point of what you came here for, really. We have an amazing panel lined up for you all. In the virtual setting, we didn't want to just have someone kind of speaking to you all. We wanted to make this an interactive and engaging conversation about the legacy of Dr. King and also what we can be doing to continue towards a journey for a better tomorrow. And so we're going to be bringing up our panelists to the screen. But one thing that we want to remind you all of, feel free to, if you want to have some comments in the chat, you can put that there. We're also going to open the floor for questions from you all. So we want to talk to you about the raise your hand feature. I know we all been in Zoom for almost a year now, but just want to remind folks of how to use the raise your hand feature. So you can just go over to your participants tab and you can click on your name. If you click the button that says more, it should give you the option to raise your hand. Another way that you can do it is, again, going to the participants tab, and then there are some reactions toward the bottom, like the check mark for yes, X for no. There's also, for some folks, it'll have the raise your hand option in that location. So definitely, once we get to the point where we're opening the floor for questions, you can utilize the raise your hand feature to let us know that you would like to ask a question to our panelists. And so we'll go ahead and kind of get started with introductions of our panelists. So we're gonna let them introduce themselves more fully, but we have Jamila Jones here, and then we also have Eric McDaniel here for us, and we'll also have Skylar Walks joining briefly. And so if we want to just go ahead and kick it off with you all going ahead and introducing yourself, telling us a little bit more about some of the work that you do, and maybe the connection that you feel with the work that MLK did.
I can go ahead and start. Hello everyone. It is still morning where you all are. It is 12:51 over here just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Yes, I live in Georgia. Go Blue. You are welcome. All the things are true. All the things are true. Yes, they sent us broken voting machines. Yes, we persevered anyway. Yes, I called and texted maybe 5,000 people in a span of 6 days. So yeah, it happened for us. Speaking of, my name is Jamila Tamira Jones. Darius is my friend. I've been friends with Darius for 5-6 years now. Hey, friend. And my pronouns are she and they. I am a Black, queer, womanist, activist, scholar, all of the cool words that go under your CV in the bullet points. That's what I do. I'm currently getting a PhD in rhetoric and composition at Georgia State University. I also run a cute little Blackity Black greeting card shop on Etsy because Black people care about each other, and it's time that greeting cards reflected that. What I do now that connects to Dr. King's work, my entire life path can be summed up in the word dreaming and imagination. And I believe one of the most cruel parts of racism and white supremacy is the snatching of the Black imagination from people, the snatching of our ability to dream of other things that can be possible for us. And so I think that Dr. King's legacy for me is always a breath of life into the body of dreaming, into the body of the imagination, into understanding that there is something possible for us right now that we don't see exist yet. I think when you look at Martin Luther King's speech, and I'm a writer and a reader, so it's a fascinating thing to read as well. The repetition of all of the hopes and the dreams that he has, a lot of the things that he's saying in that I Have a Dream speech are things that we take for granted for now, But if you read it intentionally, what he is saying is, I have a dream that a lot of the things that are currently getting people killed will be normal, right? Black and white children sitting together at a table, the children of slaves and the children of slave owners sitting together in brotherhood. The things that are getting people killed right now will be normal in the future. And I think that when you read it that way, the I Have a Dream speech is completely different. And so I'm really proud to continue Martin Luther King's work of dreaming and believing that dreams are possible and that dreams come true in real time right now. And I'm a hush.
Hello, everyone. I'm Eric McDaniel. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Government here at the University of Texas. Been here since 2003. I guess linking my work to Dr. King is, well, one, my research focuses on religion and politics, specifically the Black church and Black political behavior. And thinking about the activities of King, as my first book examined why some churches become politically engaged and others choose not to. And one of the things that I found was that, while we think of the Black church as being politically active, it is more politically active than we would think of in terms of what we're seeing out of white congregations. But for the norm, most Black churches are not. And that King was a revolutionary. I think over time, his image has become a little bit whitewashed, excuse the pun, to be more acceptable, but he was a revolutionary. He was facing criticism, not just from whites, but from Blacks as well. And I think one of the things that, if we are going to continue the legacy, is be aware of his revolutionary nature. And also that while King spoke, that a lot of people say, well, did King say we need to love each other? And it's like, that's true. But if you love your brother, you'll provide your brother justice. And I think that what's happened now is that people want to focus on the love and not the justice. You can't have true love without justice. And I think, and thinking about continuing the legacy, we must focus on justice. And justice is not easy. It is rough. We shouldn't focus on revenge. We should focus on justice. And that's hard work. And he was willing to put in the hard work, and he sacrificed his life for that hard work, along with numerous others who sacrificed their lives, their careers, and many other things to provide us with what we have today. And I think he serves as a symbol of that fight for justice, and that the fight for justice is not easy, but it's something that must continue.
All right, thank y'all so much for these introductions. So like Peyton mentioned earlier, we have some questions that we are going to throw out there, but we definitely want you all as guests in this space to, if there's something that the panelists say that speaks out to you, or you just want to chime in on or ask questions, definitely do so when we get to that part, and we'll let you know. But our first question, for the panel is, how do you define radical? And would you consider Dr. King's methods or practices as radical? And whoever feels comfortable jumping first, by all means to do so. Oh, excuse me, we didn't have Dr. Walks introduce themselves, so my apologies. Dr. Walks, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Indeed, we are continuing what I believe will be many grand risings ahead of us. I saw Dr. McDaniel's A5A. I had to represent because yesterday was Founders Day. Go ahead and soak this in. My apron where I make magic happen in my kitchen. Yes, shout out to Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. In any case, I am so thrilled to be here and to be a part of this space. As I said before, my name is Skylar Walks, and I am currently the Assistant Dean of Diversity, Equity, Accessibility, and Inclusion in the UT College of Pharmacy, as well as an assistant professor in that space. My research focuses on essentially racism and Black identity and Afro-Latinx identity, looking at the intersections of those, intersectionality, most specifically looking at gender and race as with respect and in regards to Black women, and also if you can believe it or not, looking at the disparities and inequities in justice, structural racism. And I say justice, structural racism, because it's more than criminal justice. It's criminal justice, it's juvenile justice, right? It's healthcare access, all of the systems that are supposed to, or allegedly supposed to, provide access, equity, and justice for individuals who are marginalized and disenfranchised by these structures further perpetuate that. So that's my research. I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited to be with the group. And Darius, I'm sorry, I'll punt it back to you.
And let me unmute myself. So our first question to the group is, how do you define radical, and would you consider Dr. King's methods, practices as radical?
Radical is used quite a bit. And I think we need to be very clear that if we are going to talk about radical, that we should be seen as something that's progressive and something that's pushing for a positive change. I think if we think of Dr. King's radicalism, it was a push for positive change. And if you look at, the reaction to him, he was radical. The same attacks that are levied against Black Lives Matter now were leveled against him, and probably even harsher. So he was someone who was willing to stand up to the Jim Crow system. And you had a lot of Black people say, look, don't start anything, because they just didn't want to deal with the problem. You had others who were benefiting from it, and so they didn't want to see a change in the power structure. And with radicalism comes a sense of efficacy. And I think what he had was a very strong sense of efficacy. And if you look at his push, and if you look at a lot of stuff that he put forward, even today, he would be considered radical. So I think the protest, the form of protest may not be seen as radical, but his ideas would still be seen as radical today, which the recent, Senate election, where you had Reverend Raphael Warnock, who was at Ebenezer Baptist King's Church, going against Doug Loeffler, and her attacking him, she was attacking King's legacy. She went as far as to say that he wasn't Christian enough. And so if Warnock isn't Christian enough, then in her eyes, King wasn't Christian enough. But this is the same woman who on the MLK Day was, oh, we just love King and the legacy that he gave us. And I think his radicalism is forgotten. We forget about the first part of the "I Have a Dream" speech. We said, look, we're coming to cash a check. It was very demanding. You owe us this. Now, then it would later on go into the part that the people remember. But the first part was very strong. And we need to look at his speeches, read his speeches, and realize that, this is a man who was angry. A letter from the Birmingham jail is a letter from an angry Black man. And we need to understand that Black people can be angry, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to tear down institutions. It means they're going to be angry because the institutions are tearing them down.
I love that. Anyone want to add anything to that? Like that was a good response, Brother McDaniel. But I see some more. I'll let y'all go ahead.
I'd like to add to that. I also think when we think about radicalism, we also have to think about it in terms of root analysis. It's getting to the root of whatever the issue is. I think King did an amazing job of that. I think he is known for somehow unveiling what was the root of inequity, disparity, and marginalization for African Americans, most specifically in the South, that was expanded as the movement was expanded. I do, however, believe that white folks and Black folks alike, and this is tethered to a larger conversation around Black theology in the Black church, has sanitized his image and who he was to make him more palatable to the masses. I think what that has done is distorted our memory of who King was. I also think that it challenges us to be able to recognize the contributions of our heroes while also at the same time recognizing them as imperfect. because I do want to make sure that I underscore that MLK was an imperfect human being, as we all are. And I think there tends to be this kind of push and pull and incongruence with image in the way in which it should somehow provide levity to a message of humanity and progress. And I think that's dangerous. So I think part of our radical acknowledgement of King's message is also at the same time recognizing that in addition to his root-centered work, which to me was at the crux of humanity and being critical of a system that was designed to further disenfranchise and marginalize, he himself had personal struggles based on his experiences, based on his the own complexities of the human spirit. I don't think it has to be either or. So I'll leave that there.
Also adding to that, of course, fully agree with all of the points that were mentioned, especially the sanitizing of Martin Luther King's legacy, because if you were to ask, based on what you learn in middle and high school and on Martin Luther King Day, is Martin Luther King a radical? You would say, well, no, he advocated for peace. But given the context of what was going on at the time, that was quite literally a radical idea, right? Okay, we would like the KKK to stop lynching people, and we actually need to demand that that happen, and we would rather have no jobs and no food than work for some place where we can't shop and eat. That's actually a very radical idea. That's actually a very radical idea to begin boycotts, to plan movements, especially as someone who has planned protests with 10 people and 1,000 people. The act of what you are doing when you leave your house and you shut the door and you realize that you might not come back if one thing leads to another that leads to another, you realize quite seriously what a radical thing it is that you're doing when the easier option is to just stay in your home and say and do nothing and go along to get along. So Martin Luther King was actually quite radical, even in what he was doing as we see it at the time, as we see it in the present. And even just some specific things that people don't know about Dr. King, he had to be persuaded to not carry a gun. Like he, in meetings about, okay, do you realize that you're Dr. King? Do you realize that this is some of that? Do you realize what you're doing and what you're becoming? You are going to have to pick up a path of what everyone's calling nonviolence, right? He originally was not with that. He said, no, they're threatening my family. They're bombing my house. Like somebody around here needs to be strapped. And he had to actually be convinced both politically and spiritually to take up not just nonviolence, but being disarmed as a political and social ideal, right? So that was just a really small, just a very small, specific thing, a very small, very specific thing that is sanitized from Dr. King's legacy and Dr. King's memory. Another thing that was very radical at the time and is still very much radical now, especially towards his death, his murder, he was very anti-capitalist, which is, as you're talking about getting out the root, Dr. Walks, like getting to the root. The original title of the March on Washington is the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, right? Like we need economic growth and we need economic equity and we need economic advancement in order to achieve the equity and the peace that y'all want so badly. And that was also, as it is today, a very radical idea. And the mountaintop speech, I believe it was a strike for some type of labor strike for sanitation workers. The speech that he gave, I might not get there with you, I've been to the mountaintop, the speech that he gave 24 hours before he was killed. That was a part of his next leg of activism, was to bring economic and labor justice to the African-American community. And so those ideas that he held are actually quite radical. And I think that if you just hold on to what you learn in high school and middle school, you will have a sanitized idea of who he was and just how radical those ideas were. And so for me, to answer that specific question, yes, I believe that Martin Luther King was a radical, particularly in his strategies and how he was responded to. And If not enough people think your idea is crazy, I don't think it's radical enough.
I love that. Like all that, the history, the timeline y'all just painted for us. I'm looking in the chat and it's definitely seeming like y'all are dropping some gems on people. So thank y'all for that response. Hayden, you want to go with the next one?
Yeah, so jumping into that, and some of the things that you talked about lead well into this question, particularly talking about MLK's views with capitalism and being anti-capitalist. And we're seeing that a lot more in some of the movements today. People are speaking about it a lot more. So what elements from Dr. King's legacy do you see in today's social justice movement? I think some of the ones that we focus largely on is Black Lives Matter, but any of the social justice movements for Black folks.
I think one of the things that we can't ignore is the very centering of Black women in movements. It is not a secret that there were, quite frankly, I will say a wall, if you will, of Black women who really helped to revolutionize the civil rights movement. Ella Baker, Diane Nash, Rosa Parks, Coretta Scott King, who is always named for some reason as MLK's wife, without the very necessary regard that she deserves in her own right as an activist. I think what Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi have done is really help us to understand the intersectional piece that is necessary. Stacey Abrams brought that to Georgia, right? That is necessary for movements to advance, particularly in the Black community and communities of color that benefit from that work. So I believe if a legacy, if you will, that lives on today with regard to anti-capitalism, it's not new. I don't think it's fair to necessarily say that MLK owns that premise. Obviously, there are critiques that say that was born of Marxism, and there's critiques around that being from a European invasion, and a lot of Black folks that defected, if you will, and were expats after the Red Scare in the United States, who are also attributed with somehow bringing that energy and those critiques back into the States. So I do want to make sure that we recognize that there is MLK, the man and the myth, which is perhaps a tired cliche, but I think it deserves space here to say that. He did not work alone. There were folks around him who helped him to galvanize the movement, who helped to infuse his ideas in a way that made them actionable. And Black women were, quite frankly, at the center of that, in the same ways in which they are presently.
That's my answer. So if anyone else would like to respond, that's fine.
I would if I could, and I'll be really quick. The sister spoke fantastic. You're absolutely correct. I think our Black women and women in general were ignored during that period. Like the sister said, regulated to merely just wives, domestic duties, not actual activists with boots on the ground. But we had so many names back then, right? Ida Wells, so on and so forth. I think one thing of the MLK legacy that always stands firm, even through these days, is the core value of solidarity. You can see throughout the Confederate South, with Medgar Evers in Mississippi and different brothers, different sisters, the adhesiveness of solidarity based on the core values of love, of justice, but also of truth. That's something that I think, reigns supreme with Dr. King's legacy.
The solidarity issue is critical. And there has been, King had to actually engage in basically consciousness raising and creating a strong sense of solidarity. While King is being painted as being opposed to the Black Power movement, he was not. He was opposed to kind of use of Black Power because it's a sign of use of force, but the idea of Black consciousness, being Black and proud, he openly stated that. I think somebody pointed out, that King and Malcolm X was always being pitted as antagonists, but they weren't. They were trying to achieve the same goal, but they had two different ways of thinking about it. And really their difference was not violence, nonviolence. Their difference was integration or nationalism. There's a great book by James Cone, Malcolm and Martin, An America Dream and Nightmare, where he talks about King's experience with integration was positive. You know, he went up north in grad school, dated a white woman, even thought about marrying. He had some negative experience, but overall it was positive. Whereas Malcolm X, you know, his father was killed by the Klan. He was put in foster care. He was repeatedly ridiculed. And so integration didn't work for him. He did not see the positive of integration. And so really there is solidarity there. They were trying to achieve the same goal, equality, the idea of self-determination for Black people. And this gets ignored. A lot of people think King said, "Oh, we ignore race." Like, no, King was like, "No, we will not ignore race." He wanted independent Black institutions, but he wanted independent Black institutions to be respected. He wanted people to be able to go back and forth. And I also think one of the things that King also made clear, and you get the same thing out of Malcolm X, is that equality isn't that Blacks get access to white institutions, but whites reflect Black institutions enough to come to them. And it's just as much as Blacks will be able to go to a white department store, is that white people will respect a Black department store enough to shop there. And that's true equality. And I think that is one of the key things there is he was not about getting rid of race. He was Black, he was proud. But I do think a lot of people have tried to make it sound like, oh no, he was ignoring race. Like the people who said that know nothing, have never heard a King speech, know nothing about King when they say that. It's one of these things of like, oh, this is what I read on the back of a napkin somewhere or I heard real quick. And this has been the biggest problem I have is King's legacy has been turned into something where white nationalists will invoke his name to say we're continuing his legacy. People who are clearly antagonistic to King are using King to try to undercut Black calls for action. Well, these are the same people that would have shut down his calls for action as well.
I just want to slide in and say prayers and peace and meditations, because this Monday will be far and away the most annoying and perhaps even violent Martin Luther King Day that I have ever lived through. I am 29 years old and I can feel the nuisance on the back of my neck already because of the sanitizing and the, as you said, Dr. McDaniel, the co-opting and colonization of the rhetoric of peace in order to advance the agenda of sanitizing a white supremacist uprising. I can feel the nuisance on the back of my neck. I can feel the tap dancing on my last good nerve. And so peace and blessings and sage and incense and your grandma's good cleaning playlist and whatever you have, because this Monday, I'm going to mute myself.
So Jamila, you actually you set us up perfect for this next question. Over the summer, everything happening with Black Lives Matter, I almost want to say almost normalized deaths of innocent Black people. In our world, like that's become somewhat normalized, but for the rest of America, it was kind of a new awakening. But we saw this outpour of support of the Black Lives Matter movement. So let's fast forward. We're like, 6-7 months in now. Do you feel like the support is still there? And if so, what does it look like? I love the facial responses because it tells me everything I need to know, but by all means, the floor is yours.
Now, Darius. Those people guilt followed me and guilt donated and then did nothing for 6 months. And while they were doing that, the white supremacists were planning their insurrection. If you follow me on any of the socials in which I am reckless, you will hear me say that the good white folks are consistently outworked by their white supremacist counterparts. And this summer, this red summer, y'all, the 1919 red summer, this red summer that we had was just another example of that. Sunny Day Jones, I'm gonna type it. Darius, you can type it. So it was amazing to see. And because I'm so fascinated by the imagination, the white imagination, I don't spend a whole lot of time over there, but when I do, it is fascinating to think of what whiteness imagines us to be. And it was clear over these last 6 or 7 months that they imagined us to be a cause to support and not necessarily people to be in struggle with and be in community with. And that is why you saw a bunch of donations and millions of dollars going to community orgs and bail funds and books that people bought and didn't read. And how do I know that? Because had you read anything, The Dust Jacket, the threads that I go on the internet at any given time, any of the talks and things that you said you was going to attend, this moment would not have surprised you so much. This moment that we're in, January 6, 2021, would not have surprised you so much, because the insurrection that we saw, I hate to say I told you so, but I actually don't. Like, we told you this, particularly Black women who have known the violence of whiteness and patriarchy, and who already know, we know that there is nothing more violent than a middle-class white person who doesn't get what they want. We know that. And we tried to tell you that, and it was in the books, and it was in all the books that you read, that you were supposed to read, all the podcasts you were supposed to listen to, it was there. And so when people were asking me and asking you, Darius, and asking, I'm sure all of us, what to do, I said, y'all, I'm a teacher. Please refer to your class notes, because it was all there. It was all there. So no, they're not doing nothing. And we know that because January 6th came and went and they was acting like Boo Boo the Fool, so.
Yeah, I mean,
you knew what you was doing when you wrote that question down. You're welcome.
Yeah. I concur fully. There's the classic story of the pig and the chicken, and the chicken talks about opening up a ham and eggs restaurant. And the pig is like, well, look, for you, it's a contribution. For me, it's a commitment. And what we have are a lot of people who are willing to give contributions and are not willing to commit to it. But what we also need to recognize is that I'm still shocked to this day of the number of people in the Black community who had no idea what the Black Lives Movement was about. Well, I'm not a criminal, so I shouldn't be worried about it. It's more than just that. They had op-eds in the New York Times. They had Black people I thought were relatively well educated. Like, well, what do they want? I'm like, they have a website. It's not like 60 years ago where the SCLC had to hand out pamphlets and you had to make sure you were there. It's like, there's a website. You can read about this, and people still saying, I don't know. And we get upset with white folks for not learning, but we're doing the same thing as well. We're not taking the time to sit down and read and be truthful. Sit down for 10 minutes, and you get a good idea what Black Lives Matter is about. And to me, that's problematic, because it's the need for action on everybody's part. It's a commitment. It's not a contribution. It's a commitment. And again, like the whole thing on January 6th. I like I said, it was my 45th birthday. And on my 45th birthday, the 45th president of the United States started a riot. So, I was like, oh, this is a great day for me. I woke up talking about the victory in Georgia, took a nap, and the world was on fire. So, but people were like, well, I'm shocked. I'm like, well, most of us know this. If you think about I mean, they basically reenacted Birth of a Nation. So if you think about the scene at Birth of a Nation where the Klan comes riding in and sweeps all the black legislators out, that's exactly what they seem to be reenacting. And this is a commonality for many of us. And the people who are still shocked by it, it's to what degree were you shocked because you didn't know, because you didn't want to know? It's like the same people saying, well, I didn't know blackface was problematic. Yes, you did. You just didn't want to admit to it. And this feigning of innocence needs to go away. And I think that's what's going on is people believe that they're innocent. Like, oh, I never knew these bad things were going on. I was like, yes, you did. You just chose to ignore it. And their continued focus on innocence means they can't focus on the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they can't confront the ugly until they run and hide until it comes to their doorstep, and then they want to be shot.
I'd just like to add 3 quick things to that. The first is I'm incredulous about any Black person born and having lived in the United States for an extended period of time who is unaware of any movements that are progressing to advance their liberation and full inclusion into society. We may be collegial, but I don't know if we're friends, because again, I said I'm incredulous about anyone who's that unaware and living in a Black body in a white patriarchal world. 2, I also think we have to remember D.W. Griffith, who was the director of Birth of a Nation, and that's the 1915 film that we're referring to. He too at least echoed some sentiments of repentance around the movie, and not necessarily writing it to have caused the reinsurrection, if you will, of the Ku Klux Klan, which is attributed largely to that film. But alas, that was the result. And 3, when we talk about commitment, I think we have to talk about commitment along with sentiments of sacrifice. And what I understand about white supremacy, which is a boogeyman word for a lot of well-intentioned white folks, but if you're really aiming to do ally work, you have to be able to swallow that jagged-edged pill. White supremacy is such that it operates in this way. White supremacy means that you are cognizant of disparity and disenfranchisement and structural oppression. 2, along with that awareness, it insists that you commit to a level that means you will have to make sacrifices. And that's where the impasse happens, because there's a recognition, or at least this new awakening of consciousness, that there is disparity, there is racism, and there is a desire to want to contribute. You see how white supremacy works? The telemarketers are calling right now in the middle of my speech. In any case, the point is, you have to be willing to sacrifice something in order to move towards a more equitable and intentionally inclusive, a radically inclusive world. And if you're only willing to be aware and allow yourself to feel guilty so that you can contribute to absolve yourself of that guilt, then you cannot claim yourself to be an ally. The allyship, to me, works in action along with sacrifice. Let me get to the white supremacy, excuse me.
Listen, we got the right people on this panel this year. And as you can see in the chat, you all are receiving a lot of kudos, a lot of compliments. And so we've got one last question to ask of our panel, and then we'll open the floor to the audience. And so the final question from us that we have is, what is a radical dream that you aspire to see happen one day? Whatever radical means for you, but what is that radical dream that you aspire to see, and then what do you think it'll take to get there?
That's an interesting question to ask. I guess I've become such a pessimist that I kind of stopped dreaming. I guess the one way I've thought about this is when I've taught my course in social policy. think about this in the framework of Black feminism, and where we understand things not just being about race, just being about gender, but race, gender, class. There are multitudes of things being aware of these intersectionalities. I guess the radical dream I have is to create policies, and when you create this policy, you are thinking about, okay, is this a policy, or are we creating something in which the most marginalized individual I can think of will still be able to succeed? That when I create this policy, I have the most marginalized individual in mind to make sure that there are not, that I reduce as many obstacles to their lives. That I'm aware of this. I guess that would be my radical dream. But I'll admit, I've become a pessimist, and the past, I wouldn't even say the past 4 years, I would say the past 12 years have kind of justified that pessimism. So if you think about, the rise of the Tea Party right after the election of President Obama, who said we're only here because we're upset about the bailout. But the problem is McCain voted for the bailout. So, but y'all voted for McCain. So if McCain was in office, the bailout was still going to happen, both of them. So how can you blame Obama for the bailout when McCain voted for it too? But we all knew this was coming. And and think about it. I guess my radical dream is to get rid of my pessimism. And maybe when I get rid of my pessimism, I can see some action take shape.
Oh, my radical dream is to get rid of my pessimism. Can we just take like 10 seconds and like sit in that? I'll watch the time, because you said something and I'm not gonna act like you didn't just say that. So I'll watch the time. Just take a deep breath and I'll give it 10 seconds. Go. Thank y'all for sitting with that and sitting in that. I think when, I don't know, I hear people when they say stuff, and I heard that. Yeah. I don't know what else to say. I heard that. I felt when they say, I felt that in my soul. That's what we mean. I want a bathtub, and not just any bathtub. I want like the kind with the jets on the side, and the kind that could fit 2 people, but I don't want 2 people in it. Like, it's only for me. I want a craft room where the white ladies with the YouTube channels, and they have the craft table that fold down so they can sew their kids' clothes and stuff. I want that. And for me, it is a radical dream to want things that other people already have. Because for so long, Black people have been told that what other people already have is so far out of the realm of possibility that we should be okay with sticking our feet in a tub of hot water. That we should be okay, that I should be okay doing these little Christmas crafts with my baby cousins on the living room floor with newspapers spread out. That we should be okay with that, because what other people already have is out of the realm of our possibility. And so what I want is to know that what these white folks already have, and that is not just material, tangible things. I'm talking about the feeling of safety when you close your door at night. I'm talking about the feeling of freedom when you at a festival post-pandemic where your mask don't go nowhere, but like when you at a festival and when your favorite artist is up on stage and they start singing your favorite song and like hundreds of thousands of people know the words, and you feel safe to know that nobody there means you any harm and nobody is looking at you funny because you got tattoos, or because I want to be queer outside in public and have that be fine. I want to hold hands with my girlfriend and my boyfriend and have both of those reactions be the same. That's what I want. I want the peace of mind and the safety that other people already have. And yes, that includes a bathtub and a craft room with a table that folds down. That's what I want.
So TJ is going to be my new best friend. And I think I'm just saying, for me, the radical dream is for Black bodies, Black love, Black spirit to be seen as more than utilitarian. I think when we are only seen as utilitarian, which has been the historical reality, our Black bodies are seen only with respect to their functionality, to our athletic prowess and talents, to our ability to birth or raise other people's children, to our ability to clean and cook and take care of the houses of other folks, even at the negligence of our own. To be seen in a Black body or have a Black spirit or a Black love that is utilitarian is to not see Black love, all Black love, radical Black love, queer Black love, explicit Black love, to be able to see that as beautiful and attractive and transcendent and not as vulgar or off-putting or upsetting or disrespectful or challenging. To have the Black spirit to be seen as something beyond that of utilitarian is to see the Black spirit as free, is to see the Black spirit as something that transcends the material world. To see the Black spirit as something beyond that of utilitarianism is to recognize that the Black spirit is extraordinary. To have survived and thrived and still be able to show up in spaces where we are confronted unapologetically sometimes, explicitly sometimes, and implicitly and covertly at other times, with systems that are intended and designed to keep us at a level that will not allow us to transcend, advance, or move forward. And we still manage to make nice. And we still manage to be pleasant. And we still manage to do the Busset Challenge on TikTok. All of those things, to me, articulate what it truly means to be seen beyond I can't even talk. You know what I'm trying to say. I can't even get it out because I'm in rapture as I'm thinking about what that looks like. And I put in the chat that I go to Brooklyn Afropunk Fest, well, before the pandemic, because it was a space that almost felt surreal. It's this post-structural, post-modern world where there is Black joy, Black freedom, Black music, Black businesses, Black people expressing themselves without constraint. And it is one of the most glorious, to me, manifestations of Black joy that I've ever been able to experience manifest. And so if that can be something that could be somehow translational in the way in which we move and experience the world and one another in an integrated space, where we're allowed to do that, where we're celebrated for doing that, where we're encouraged to do that without the policing of our bodies, our spirit, our love, that to me would be a radical Zen.
Y'all are blowing it out the water, honestly. Like y'all are just dropping all the gems and giving us, y'all are making us warm. Like I said, we're not in person, but I feel this energy from y'all. So thank y'all so much just for telling us what y'all dreams are. Because I mean, you didn't have to tell us that, but that's what y'all wanted to share with us. And so opening that part of y'all with us and sharing that. Like we said, we had some questions that we populated that we were going to ask the panelists. And now we want to open the floor for our guests to ask our panelists some questions. We did ask if you can use the raise your hand feature just so we can keep a little structure and organization, but we'll do our best to monitor the chat and also see the hands. I know I don't want to pronounce your name wrong, but Watson. I know you had a question. I'm also going to put us on the time so we're going to wrap around 12:50 just so we can close out with some announcements. So we got a window of time for some Q&A with y'all. So Watson, if you want to go ahead and start with yours, and then we'll monitor the rest of the hands.
It's Chevis like Regal, Chevis Watson, lead organizer for Working Group 512. I used to work with Dr. Roundtree and Black Mamas ATX. I thought it was so interesting what the sister TJ said and what Dr. Eric said. So I'm an organizer, and I think in this time, a lot of us were so passionate about what had happened and what we were seeing in the dynamic conversations that we didn't align with other organizers. Organizers know that when our hands are in the mud, all next steps are applicable steps. So I think for our white allies, and also for those with dormant spirits and possibly those with no spirits, we didn't challenge them with applicable steps. Yeah, sure, it's giving money, but are you applying this in your conversation? Or when you wake up in the morning, do you first think Black-owned business? When you go to sleep at night, do you also pray for the Black community? Blase blah. I'm from the city of New Orleans, and I feel like all of you have really spoken so well on what this day should be about and the findings that we should have. But as an organizer, I think that was our failure. We did not organize around this mission. We just protested, we just marched, we just rallied. But Dr. King was a true organizer. He was a true organizer. There was always strategy behind it. There was always short-term goals and long-term goals. So I would like to hear TJ's perspective on that, Dr. Eric's perspective on that, if we have time. Thank you again for the time and space.
I am a fellow organizer. I like to say academia is my side job. My full-time job is a community member, like an organizer is what I do. I actually made a soul commitment to not do activism and organizing for money because it's soul work. And so I had to find a side job, and that's reading and writing and talking about reading and writing all the time. So word, like I agree with that. Like I agree with that. Like when I sit back and I look at the last year of the violence that we were subjected to and how that timed up with a pandemic. And I feel like there was a question earlier was asked, how does MLK strategies or things apply to my life? And the second answer I would give is organizing strategy, is having people like Byard Reston and Diane Nash in your corner to say like, okay, yes, vision. And the 1, 2, 3 is what? And when people get there, what they gonna eat, how they gonna get there, how they gonna get home, what we gonna do with the kids, what we gonna do, like the very, very specific, because kids show up to protest. CNN don't show you that, but kids show up to protest. And what do you do when somebody shows up and brings their kids? And so it's just the specifics of that is one of the things that I wanna challenge white allies and comrades. I don't need allies, comrades. If you were a comrade, come speak to me. What comrades to do is to, how do you integrate a strategy? How do you integrate us into your community and starting that in your thought process? Because I was asked, well, what can I do? What should I do? And I started asking people really simple questions. And this is a shout out to Darius. I asked, what kind of candles do you buy? It was a very simple question. What kind of candles do you buy? Did you know that there's like a list of dozens of Black-owned candle companies that make sense, that are similar, if not way better than the ones you pick up at Bath and Body Works and Yankee? What is one aspect of your life that you can switch to being completely Black-owned and Black focused? Did you know that Black people make cleaning products? Did you know we make planner supplies? Did you know we have YouTube channels? Did you know we have TV shows? Like what? I mean, think about scandal and Grey's Anatomy. If you watch Grey's Anatomy, like sit with the fact that once a week for, I don't watch it, who knows how long, don't judge me, for a decade now, you have been sitting and absorbing something that was produced by a Black woman. Like how, like, do you really know that if you watch Little Fires Everywhere, like a Black woman wrote most of that dialogue? So how is it that you can integrate and organize your life around supporting my life? And I need specific things, like love is about being specific, community is about being specific. And what are the specific things that you are going to do that supports Black lives all the time? Agreed. Agreed. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, the organizing is, you know, one of the most critical things. Any social movement always suffers from that problem of one, getting people giving people a sense of efficacy. They can go out and do things. So, you know, I noted my pessimism. My pessimism is kept me from doing things. Stuff like, what's it going to mean in the end? But it's overcoming that pessimism. It's overcoming the fear, things like that. I mean, it's you know, I think of King's speech, but if not, where he talks about don't do this because you're looking for a reward. Don't do this, you know, because you're trying to avoid. Don't do what's right because you're trying to go to heaven or you're trying to avoid hell. Do what's right because it's right, and that's really hard to get people to do. But if you look at kind of the structure of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, it was basically you had a bunch of organizers in a bunch of different cities, and building that network of communication across them was critical. And and you know, I think like one great book to understand that is Alden Morris's book of the Civil Rights Movement, and really one of my favorites in talking about organizing is Charles Payne's "I've Got the Light of Freedom," where he talks about, you know, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee organizing in rural Mississippi, and the fact that, you know, it was an active event and where they had to call out people who, you know, so they went to church every Sunday, and basically you go to church every Sunday and you say, God's going to protect you. I've got God on my side, blah, blah, blah. But then you don't want to go out and register to vote. What kind of Christian are you? And this is the same thing King would say to people. It's kind of get them where they are and kind of point out there. If you are so strongly believe that you're doing what's right, then you shouldn't be afraid of. And I think organizing is really about meeting people where they are and moving them to where they need to be. And the large part of it is trying to make sure you can get multiple units to work together in unison. Because, you know, was well aware, you know, the NAACP was mad at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. You had the conflicts with CORE, with SNCC, you know, but the idea of getting everybody to work together. And the drama behind the March on Washington was amazing. The people who weren't allowed to speak or who their speeches were censored. This is really difficult work because you've got to, and that's something organizing just to get people to do something at the local level is extremely difficult. To get them to work together at the national level, I mean, you might as well call it a miracle.
I would like to add one thing to that really quickly, is that as we're organizing and strategizing, to not render our queer brothers, sisters, and siblings to the background. We know that that happened with Bayard Rustin. We know that in many ways there was a restructuring of the narrative as a consequence of wanting to distance the movement from communist and or queer identity. And that's hugely problematic. So that would be the only nugget that I would like to add to what these two brilliant minds said.
Thank y'all for that. We have time for maybe one more question from the audience here.
I have a question.
Go for
to
it.
the audience and to the other panelists. How might we hold individuals, spaces, organizations, and institutions accountable beyond the crises that move them to statements of solidarity into the holistic infusion of solidarity to advance equity and radical inclusion. What does that accountability look like?
I guess going back to my, going back to my statement. I'm just about going back to my statement of pessimism. Is I'm not really sure how to hold these people accountable. It's one of these things where it's like we don't want contributions, we want commitments, and we don't want you mad. We don't want you upset and mad for Black people. We want you mad and upset with Black people. And I think that in order to get them to do this is, it's one thing for Nike to sign Colin Kaepernick to a contract, but what does that? That's symbolic. We like, a lot of the work is talking about it. Like this work is symbolic, not substantive, and so we need substantive change. And I think one thing you're seeing kind of out of NBA players is telling the owners, you have access to these individuals in power. You need to use that to achieve our goals. And so I do think, like when the Bucks started the boycott, that while they're in the bubble, was a sign of like, look, this is where we live. This is the state we represent. And if you will not speak up for us, you will not speak up for people who look like us, and you'll say Black Lives Matter, but you won't act on it, then don't expect to see us here. I do think there is an issue of follow through and saying, okay, don't just say Black Lives Matter, but say, what does that mean? So what are you going to do? Make them actually vocalize what this statement means and what this requires of them. And I think that'll mean they've written it down, they formalized it, and from there you can go back to them and say, okay, have you done these things? And if so, why not? And if not, why is this so?
I wanted to wait until my fellow panelists spoke because to be very clear, I am the one who goes on hunger strikes and chains themselves to the door. So I like to hear where the pulse of the conversation is before I say things like chain yourself to the door and don't leave. Before I say things like chain yourself to their desk. But we're here now, so that's fine. If that is not in the lane of things to do, if that is not in the realm, if that's not in your lane, please ask very specific questions and don't stop asking until you get very specific answers. I love flowery writing, like I'm getting a PhD in English. All I do is read flowery writing about how much someone loves something else. And so that means that I'm looking for something beyond that. What kind of candles do you buy? Or like what is a very specific, like how specific can you get about your commitment to this process? You don't tell your mortgage company, oh, I really love the idea of Wells Fargo and I think they're so amazing and I'm committed to this process. They're going to say, and where is the check that matches this commitment? They don't take mortgage payments in statements of solidarity. Okay, it's like you can tell your car company, you can tell them, I love Toyota very much, and I am committed to the advancement and the future of Toyota, and the inclusion of Toyota in my daily life is something that I'm very proud of. And they're going to say, your note is $360 a month. What are what tangibly is going to match that commitment. And not to take it back to money, but capitalism is a very clear line that can be drawn that can tell you where somebody's commitment lies, especially an institution like a college or a university. What is the line item that matches this commitment? Where does this commitment show up in next fiscal year's budget? Who are the faculty and staff, and what is their salary in comparison to people who don't do this work? Am I to understand that an unpaid committee is supposed to take on this work? Because if you look at this position, the dean of this institution, all of these things are in her job description, and this is what she's getting paid. So are you expecting a free committee of people to do the work that is in a 5-figure job description of a dean somewhere else? Ask very specific questions and don't stop until you get very specific answers. And for me, when I stop getting specific answers, I take very specific actions leading up to when will you be unchaining yourself from this desk? It's like, so the kind of specific questions, you can answer the specific questions that I'm giving you now, or you can answer the kind of specific questions that I'll be giving you in the future, which is like, where can you find keys to take these handcuffs off of your desk? And I'm committed to doing that. And I think that just to round it back out, the conversations that are often had about Martin Luther King and particularly comparing him to Malcolm X as like you have the peaceful one and then the radical one. By any means necessary is also a hunger strike. It's also walking 300 miles and then giving speeches about jobs and freedom. It's like you have to understand that those two ideologies were much closer to converging than they were to being polar opposites. Long story long, that's my answer. Ask very specific questions until you give very specific answers. I ask politicians, how much is a gallon of milk? That's my only question. When I walk up to a politician who claims they want to do something for me and they want all these things for my community, how much is a gallon of milk? How much is a pack of diapers and how long does it last? Because there's very specific, is the book that you wrote available in your local library? Where can I find it? Very specific questions that will tell me if your commitment is real or if it's on paper. That's it.
And with that, I think we're gonna go ahead and close it. So if y'all wanna give our panelists a strong round of applause, feel free to unmute yourself and clap if you feel inclined. Y'all dropped all the gems.
Thank you.
So I'm going to hand it over to our co-president-elects. If they want to talk about our first meeting and everything, that would be great. But thank you again to our panelists. We appreciate y'all. We could not have this event without y'all.
Yes, thank you all. To our panelists, thank you so much for being here. That was a wonderful conversation, and I'm so glad that I was able to sit in on that. And to everybody who attended and was engaged in the chat, like, thank y'all so much for helping to co-create this space. So again, I'm Desiree and Justin. We are the co-president-elects of BFSA, and our next meeting is going to be February 24th from 11:30 to 1 p.m. So be sure that you stay tuned to our socials and our newsletter in order to stay up to date on that meeting and what the topic is. We are still planning, but I promise you it's going to be worthwhile.
And then we also just want to bring our treasurer, Charles, if he wants to talk a little bit about becoming a member and how to pay dues for this semester and in future years.
Greetings, folk. What a great time today. Thank you for all of you that have participated, either in the chat or with your questions. Looking forward to another great semester with BFSA. We actually have had so many members pay for dues this past semester, as well as departments sponsoring members' dues. I want to just say that please continue to do that, reaching out to your departments to see if they can pay your dues. If you have any questions for me, please let me know. You can reach me at a treasurer email. But I do want to encourage you to pay your dues for the rest of the semesters. We're still trying to brainstorm ways to get you the swag items that we do have. So be on the lookout for communication for that as well. And if you need anything else, yeah, just email the treasurer account.
All right, so again, we want to say thank you all for attending our virtual MLK luncheon celebration this year. Again, a huge shout out to our panelists for dropping all the gems and the labor that you all gave to us today. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate all of the guests that's in attendance too. Like I've been looking at the participant count, and we've had over 100 people, almost 200 people in this space consistently. So we appreciate you all being here. Peyton, if there's anything you want to add as well.
Yes, so we've had a lot of great conversations happening in the chat, and recommendations, links, and things for folks to support. So we're gonna take all of that and we will compile it, and we'll be sharing this recording and also some of that information through the BFSA listserv. So if you missed it in the chat, you'll have another chance to catch it. And if you want to also share it with your network, you'll have that available to yourself. Really quickly, we're also going to share, usually we do have a lunch with the MLK celebration. And so this year we're going to share a list of Black-owned restaurants here in Austin. And so we really encourage you to go out and support those restaurants over the MLK weekend, and also just continuing to do so. As our panelists mentioned, what are you doing every day? How can you include supporting Black folks and Black businesses in your daily lives? So we really want to thank y'all again for coming out, and we look forward to continuing to see you at programming and working with you for the rest of the semester.
Thank y'all for being here.